Welcome to the bright side of 50. Hey, y'all. Hey, welcome to another episode. Well, actually, a repeat episode from almost a year and a half ago. I thought it was really important to bring this episode back because sleep it should be such an important priority in our lives. And so often it's not. I continue to hear more women, especially ambitious women who are out there doing the darn thing, talk about how exhausted they are, talk about how often they lose sleep and they're not getting at least 7 to 8 hours of sleep. And of course, it varies how much each of us need. But honestly, we really should be prioritizing sleep. And in this episode that I did over, like I said, about a year and a half ago with our special guest, Shauna Reed, who is a licensed clinical social worker, who's really into a really holistic way to doing life, a holistic approach to wellness. And she incorporates sleep and really teaching people about sleep hygiene into her practice. So I wanted to re-upload this episode so that we could have it at the forefront, so that we can continue to keep sleep as a priority because it is so important, because it impacts the way that we do life and it impacts our ability to do life and professional life and personal life and relationships at the highest. We always want to be trying to focus at the highest level. And it's important. Sleep is so important. We need to put this back at the top of our list of priorities. So, without further ado, let me reintroduce this episode and our special guest, Shauna Reed, licensed clinical social worker and owner of My Beautiful Intentions. Shauna Reed is a licensed clinical social worker who has been in practice for over 25 years. She is the creator of Beautiful Intentions, which encompasses a holistic approach to emotional healing. She utilizes this approach to help her clients understand how their nutrition, physical activity, sleep hygiene, trauma, and stress are impacting their lives. She subsequently guides and supports them with making the necessary changes to live a healthier life, both emotionally and physically. So today we'll be talking to Shauna about sleep hygiene and the importance of getting good sleep. And this is a really important topic for me because I am a person, as you know, Shauna, who doesn't get very good sleep. And it's been a problem for as long as I can remember. So I think a
You're
lot of
not
people don't
alone.
even, what'd you say?
I said you're not alone.
I
You're
know.
not alone. That is most of us, quite frankly.
Well, let's start with what sleep hygiene is, because I know it's a term that a lot of people don't even have never heard of. So what is sleep hygiene exactly?
Yeah, sleep hygiene, quite simply, is just a term that's used to describe the habits and behaviors and environmental factors that contribute to good quality sleep.
Mm-hmm. So why is sleep hygiene such an important piece of the work that you do with your clients?
So much happens while we sleep.
Hmm.
So many of our bodily functions slow down during sleep, including our breathing, our heart rate, our body temperature drops, digestion slows down, neurons in the brain actually shrink, right?
Mm.
And this is like the prime opportunity for your brain. It just kind of jumps in and takes over. It doesn't slow down during this time. It actually revs up and starts cleaning house. So it takes advantage of, like, let's say, for example, those smaller neurons, and it uses that space in between them to start pushing toxins out. It's actually quite incredible. It's a lot that goes on when we sleep, which is why it
Wow.
is so important.
That's crazy. So what you're saying is sleep is an opportunity for us to rebuild and rejuvenate.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely. It is really the time when the most healing takes place. It helps to recharge, it increases your capacity for resilience, it helps you adapt more easily to change, it helps you connect, make more thoughtful decisions. It increases your energy, helps you feel less overwhelmed, increases your ability to regulate your emotions, it helps you learn. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. And, a lot of people who struggle with mental health concerns also struggle with sleep.
Mm.
Sometimes just regulating their sleep and improving sleep quality can have a major impact on decreasing some of their other symptoms.
You know what I've noticed? That's so interesting. I've noticed as I move through my 40s and now that I'm in my 50s, that my brain doesn't seem to function the way it once did. And I often blame it on my age, because as we age, we're like, oh, I'm forgetful because, oh, it's just my age, or, I can't process things as quickly because it's my age. But what I haven't done is connect my sleep habits that I've carried over, from my teens and my 20s to now. It's just not working for me. It's not working. My brain is not functioning on the few hours of sleep that I've always gotten. So my question for you is, how does sleep deprivation impact our ability to function? I'm sure it has something to do with that for me too.
Absolutely. I think, of course, our functioning changes as we age. That's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen. But I think that there are things that we can do to just sort of keep our functioning at its optimal level, right?
Mm-hmm.
Getting good sleep is definitely one of those things. Sleep deprivation and poor quality sleep can result in a number of difficulties, including things like cognition issues, which includes things like memory problems, difficulty making decisions,
Mm.
problems with reasoning. It can result in sleep deprivation can result in emotional dysregulation, brain fog, fatigue, weight gain, which can lead to obesity, which is
Mm.
a problem all in itself, right? Diminished
Mm.
libido, which for some is a concern. um, Decreased alertness and reaction time. It can result in high blood pressure. It also, sleep deprivation also reduces our immune function, excuse me,
Mhm.
and makes us way more susceptible to chronic illnesses like diabetes, heart attack, heart failure, stroke. Um, Plus, it can also cause an increase in symptoms of depression
That
and
is a
anxiety.
lot of information. And then decreased alertness and reaction time.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
it's like driving under the influence, basically.
It is. It is. I think they say that it's equal to, I think one night, like staying awake for 24 hours is equal to like a blood alcohol level of 0.1, if I'm not
Mm.
mistaken. Yeah, if I'm, it's pretty significant. And the number of accidents that, that folks have when they are just tired is
Mm-hmm.
also pretty outstanding. I get
Mm-hmm.
it's yes. So
Wow.
yeah, but that decreased alertness and reaction time certainly, I'm guessing, has something to do with it.
Wow. And you also talked about like the mental part of it. So how is poor sleep directly related to mental health?
So your mental health affects your sleep, and your sleep affects your mental health, right?
Mm.
They're bidirectionally related, which means that if one improves or worsens, the other can be affected. So let's say that you are someone who struggles with depression, and statistically speaking, about 75% of people who suffer from depression have trouble falling asleep or staying
Mm-hmm.
asleep.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to improve your sleep patterns, there's a really good chance that you'd see an improvement in your symptoms of depression. In
Mm.
addition, or conversely, if you were to improve your symptoms of depression through things like therapy, diet change, physical activity, you'd likely see your sleep difficulties diminish. So they really affect one another, right? You improve one, the other is very likely to improve as well.
And I think people just aren't connecting to the two because they don't know. And that's why I wanted to do this episode with you, because I want people to be enlightened, so they can continue to do research and they can improve their sleep hygiene. And maybe it'll help with some of the depression that a lot of people have really found themselves in, especially during this pandemic. So I really thought
Yeah,
it was important,
absolutely.
to do this topic. What are some signs of sleep deprivation?
So waking up and still feeling tired or groggy, yawning a lot or nodding off throughout the day, irritability, mood fluctuations, poor concentration, increased sugar and carb cravings, or just an
Mm.
increased appetite. So here we go back to that
Mm-hmm.
obesity thing, or potential for weight gain, right?
Yep.
A general sense of feeling unwell, decreased motivation, increased impulsivity. These are some things that you might experience if you've been deprived even one night's sleep, or even just a few hours, in the night.
Wow. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I always say that there are all these, and I always say, but this is true, there are a lot of dimensions to wellness. and
Mm-hmm.
all of those dimensions inform each other. And so I'm listening to you list off some of these signs of sleep deprivation, and then I'm connecting them to our relationships with other people, our responses to other people, maybe
Mm,
triggered by certain things and how we react to those triggers. If we're not getting enough rest, of course we're going to be irritable. Of course we're going to
absolutely.
be, very upset and like go off on people because there are other things that are happening with our body because we haven't gotten enough rest. Our
Mm-hmm.
relationships with our family members, our relationships with our significant other. All of this
Mm-hmm.
is impacted when you
Mm-hmm.
don't get enough rest. Our
Yeah.
employer, all of these things.
Yeah. There's so much overlap, and I totally agree with you, right? When your sleep suffers, there's so many other areas of your life that as well, your
Mm-hmm.
relationships, your
Mm-hmm.
eating, your work, your professional life, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's so much that can be affected by your sleep, right? And so much that can improve if you improve your
Right.
sleep, like if you're able
That's
to
where I
improve your
was.
sleep, right?
Exactly. So some say 7 hours is enough sleep. Others say 8. I've even heard as much as 9 for children. So I'm wondering if there is an average, like a perfect number of hours of sleep that we should be getting, or does that depend on the individual, or does it depend on your age?
Yeah, good question. I think it can all be correct.
Mm-hmm.
Babies, children, adolescents, they all need more sleep than the average adult. And as we age, that number actually decreases, right? So we need a
Mm-hmm.
little less sleep. But let's just say that we're talking about the average adult. There's a lot of research that shows that 6 hours or less of sleep per night puts you at greater risk for many of the things that we just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in addition, if you're dealing with a condition like heart disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, lack of sleep actually increases your risk of death.
Oh,
And
wow.
this isn't me trying to be morbid here. It is a reality, right? And I think that it's important for us to talk about, right? because
Mm-hmm.
because that is the real risk, right? The shorter lifespan, death, that kind of thing, right? So it's important to really just kind of point that out. um as far as how much we actually need as adults, I do think it varies. More than 6 for sure.
Okay.
um, Perhaps somewhere between 7 and 9 hours a night. I think that
Mm-hmm.
it just differs based on who you are as an individual.
Mm.
And that's it's the same with most things in our lives, right? Like what works for me isn't always going to necessarily work for you, right? So it's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
this is about like bio individuality and who we are as individuals and what works for us. But I would say somewhere between 7 and 9 hours, no more than 9, because then you start to get into a different issue,
Yeah.
right? When you start to get
Okay.
too much sleep.
Okay.
But it's really something that you have to test out, and figure out
Yeah.
what's right for you.
That's interesting because so that just means, I average about 5.5 to 6. So
Mm,
I need to just kind of figure out a way, and I'm sure we'll go through some tips on getting a better night's sleep later. So I just need to add another hour somewhere.
mm.
Maybe I should stop scrolling on social media so much at night, doing
Yeah,
reels, doing my Instagram reels. So can we talk about the circadian rhythms and what they are and why they're important?
sure. So the circadian rhythms are the approximate 24-hour patterns the body and brain go through, and it allows for changes in the body's physical and mental states. So these natural processes, including the sleep wake cycle, which is what we're focusing on, typically respond to light and dark. So think the rising and the setting of the sun,
Okay.
right? Our bodies, for optimal health, should basically be set to the same cycle, the same rhythm as the sun, which it makes sense, right? Because the sun is the source of life.
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't exist. So it's actually quite amazing that we've
Mm-hmm.
been sort of set up, to function with that same rhythm, right? With the
Mm-hmm.
same rhythm as the source of life. Um, Really, poor sleep, it either disrupts or is a result of the disruption of our circadian rhythms. And as a result, our physical and emotional health can be significantly compromised.
Mm.
So it's definitely something that I think we want to focus on. And as we talk about it a little bit more, you'll see that sort of learning how to match the rhythm of the sun becomes very important and sleep hygiene,
Mm-hmm.
and getting better sleep and getting good sleep, I should say.
So speaking of good sleep, can we touch on like hormones like cortisol and melatonin and how they play a major role in our sleep?
Sure. I think that the body is so complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so much to it. But the cortisol, I feel like cortisol and melatonin have become like kind of buzzwords, right?
Right.
Around, sleep and health and that sort of thing. And both of them are very necessary to our well-being. Both play an important role in immune function. Both are anti-inflammatory.
Mm-hmm.
Even cortisol, right? In the right amounts. Again, they're just both very important for good health, but they each play a different role in our bodies when it comes to the sleep-wake cycle, right? So when it comes to our sleep, they each come into play during different times of that cycle. We
Mm.
can really kind of think of cortisol as simply as like the awake hormone, right?
Okay.
It's the one that we want to be produced when we are awake because it
Okay.
helps keep us awake, right? And melatonin is really the like rest and sleep hormone because we
Okay.
want it to be produced when we are, resting and when we're sleeping, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when cortisol levels are high, melatonin levels should be low. This ideally happens in the morning when the sun rises, right? Um, when melatonin levels are high, cortisol levels should be low.
Mm.
This is supposed to happen when the sun goes down. So when this synchronicity is out of whack, that's when you're likely to see these disruptions in sleep.
Wow. Man, it is complex.
Mm-hmm. It
So
is.
are you just somebody who, like, I know that you're a licensed therapist and you're bringing this into your practice, but so you studied this for quite a while.
Well, I've been looking into it because I feel like it's an important thing to bring into my practice. I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
my approach is a very holistic one, right? And I feel like I am doing my clients a disservice if we're not focusing on their eating, if we're not focusing on their sleep, if we're not
Yeah.
focusing on their physical activity, in addition to their trauma and stress,
Yeah.
right? Because there's so much overlap in all of those, right? And I think it's, we talked about that bidirectionality, right? Like I feel
Mm-hmm.
like there's so much of that within these different buckets, right? One affects another, so yeah, it's the sleep piece is really important. And there's so much more, to learn and understand. But I think even with just a basic understanding, you can
Yeah.
improve your sleep and improve
So
your
you,
health.
we talked about 7 things that can impact sleep positively and negatively. So let's go down that list.
So let's start with light. Um, the sleep wake cycle or circadian rhythm is all about the cycle of the sun, as
Okay.
we have discussed, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it's out, we should be getting light. When it's not out, when the sun's not out, we shouldn't be getting as much. And at a certain point, little to none.
Mm-hmm.
The truth is that we have some of the worst light pollution. There's light everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
24/7,
Mm-hmm.
inside and outside, right? I mean,
Right.
think about our homes even. Let's not even consider what's going on out there in the streets, right? But let's think about our homes with our computers, our smartphones, overhead lights, TVs. I mean, we're constantly putting light in our eyes, and it is sending a particular signal to our bodies that what we should be awake, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So it's really important, I think, that we pay attention to that, right? So again, going back to that circadian rhythm, that we try to be as much in alignment with the sun as possible. Um, so we want the production of cortisol to decrease at night
Okay.
because
Okay.
it essentially keeps us awake. And dark is the thing that signals that production of melatonin and a decrease in the production of cortisol. So we want that melatonin at night so we can fall asleep. Um, so what that means basically is that once the sun goes down, we want as little artificial light as we can stand.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly much easier said than done because, again, we're living in a world where we are consumed by our
Yeah.
devices, by our TV, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think ideally, you can shut down those devices. You can shut down overhead lights an hour or two before bedtime, um, which can be very difficult. I try it every single
Yeah.
night, and it is
No,
much
it's
easier
hard.
said than done.
It
Much easier. You
is.
know, we tend to work into the night. I think there's a lot of us that feel like we're more productive at night, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we keep that light in our face. You know, we don't sit down with a pencil and paper and do work. We sit at our computers and we do work,
Yeah,
right?
right.
But I think that it is really important to incorporate a practice of shutting it down an hour or two before bed. And if it's really hard for you to do, start lower. Start with 30 minutes. Start with 15 minutes.
But
Do what you can do.
ideally it's 2 hours.
Ideally, I would say 1 to 2 hours.
Wow.
I think one can be fine. I think
Mm-hmm.
one can be fine, you know. And maybe an hour before that, you just start dimming lights. You
Okay.
know, you turn off the overhead lights and you use more lamps, right? That
Yeah.
that sort of thing.
I've even
Um,
caught myself getting up to get water in the middle of the night or going to the bathroom and then checking my social media. It's like such an addiction.
such an addiction. And you know, the truth is that I have that issue too. You know, I
Okay, good.
definitely do. I will lay in my bed and I've been trying to break this habit for a while now, right? Where I will lay in my bed and I'll just be on YouTube, you know, just scrolling through, right? I mean, that's a whole other podcast actually, you know, like
Right.
the sort of the damage that sort of thing does, not only to our sleep, but just to our well-being, you know. But yeah, it's a hard habit to break. um Possible, but it's hard, it's difficult, it's not easy,
Well, I
you
think you
know.
and I, we don't help each other because we're always finding something funny and then putting it in the DMs and
Right,
and
right, and just
going back
going
and
back and
forth.
forth. Yeah. hmm yeah.
Okay. So what are some
um
things that we can do?
so trying to shut down your devices, of course, right? um Also, try to watch the sunset, you
Yes.
know. It the sunset actually Watching the sunset actually helps suppress cortisol, right? And when
Mm,
cortisol is suppressed, melatonin starts, you know, coming into action, right? You know, it starts being produced, right? Or it can be produced more easily. And that's it's such a beautiful, wonderful thing to do, you know.
so
So if you
beautiful.
have that option, right, of watching the sunset, do it.
Hmm.
It can be really helpful. Also, getting 15 minutes of unfiltered sunlight first thing in the morning
Mm,
is a really good way to kind of set your circadian rhythm. This actually prompts the production of serotonin,
nice.
which I know we all love serotonin, right? Which it does that doesn't only help you feel better throughout the day, but it also is necessary for the production of melatonin in the evening.
Oh,
Again,
really?
here's yet another layer of complexity, right? You know, and
Wow.
there's so many more, you know, stuff that I don't even know, you know. But it's quite fascinating. But yes, it helps. Serotonin is necessary for the production of melatonin. So we want serotonin, you know,
Hmm.
and getting that 15 minutes of unfiltered sunlight first thing in the morning can help with the production of serotonin, and
Nice.
again can help to sort of set your set that circadian rhythm. Also, decreasing blue light in the evening, especially.
Okay.
You can try things like wearing the blue light blockers, those ones that actually have that orange tint to them.
Oh, okay.
I know there's a lot of them that don't have much of a tint at all. Your best bet is going to be the ones that do have that orange tint. They are not attractive at all.
Right. Not
But
at
I
all.
think no, not at all. Not at and there doesn't exist a pair that is attractive. However, if you find yourself working a little bit later at night, that kind of thing, it might be a good idea for you to get them. And I would also try to adjust your computer as much as possible, right? Decreasing the light on your computer as much as you can. Also on your phones, you know, if you have a blue light filter, turning that on in the
I think you
evening.
can do it automatically.
I
You
think
can
you
have it
can.
set. Hmm.
I think mine does. Mine
Yeah.
mine comes on automatically. Again, it does not mean that you should just be on your phone and on your computer as much as you want to, right? We still need to try to get off of them, you know, an hour or two before bedtime. But if you have to be on them, you might want to try doing some of these things just to sort of decrease that blue light.
Hmm. And then you were talking about, are there like things we can take? Do we take like vitamins, magnesium, or anything like that?
So I know a lot of people take melatonin as a sleep aid,
Yeah.
right? And melatonin I think is great, and but I think we want to be careful, with that. There are some that suggest that taking it for no more than 3 months. Melatonin is also great for helping you fall asleep, but not necessarily stay asleep.
Okay.
I really want to talk about magnesium because I feel like magnesium is like this super mineral, right? Our bodies require magnesium for hundreds of its processes,
Hmm.
hundreds, right? I think the latest research is indicating 600 plus processes within our bodies. Yes, it's
Really?
nuts. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. Magnesium has an effect on increasing serotonin. So here's serotonin again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Remember, that's really important for the production of melatonin. Um, Decrease cortisol. It lowers adrenaline, which can help with
Mm.
sleep. It increases melatonin and it increases access to the parasympathetic nervous system, right? So it helps us to relax. Talking about magnesium from the perspective of sleep right now, but
Hmm.
again, like I'm sure you can understand how a lot of these things can just affect, again, your health overall, particularly your mental health, right?
Hmm.
Um, and you can take magnesium as a supplement, right? If you choose. Of course, if you choose to do something like that, I would check in with your doctor just to make sure.
Yeah.
Magnesium is really interesting, and the way that you kind of figure out how much you can take, or how much you need to take, is so magnesium can cause loose stools, right? If you happen to be taking too much of it, that's
Yeah.
what you will see, right? And so sometimes when you're trying to get the proper dose, you take it until that point, and then you back it up just a little bit and take a
Okay.
little bit less, so that's not, because that is, you don't want that, you know.
So
You
you
don't want
want
that.
to try it until you get to the oops and then
Yeah,
back it up a little
exactly.
bit.
And then you're like, okay. Maybe not that much, right? But let's try a little bit less. But that's also, I mean, and this is a little off the subject, but it can also help with constipation, right?
That's what
Magnesium
I
can be
was
very
thinking.
helpful. Yeah, so you could take it in supplement form. You can also just eat more of the foods that contain it.
Hmm.
Pumpkin seeds. Pumpkin seeds are phenomenal for
Really?
so many reasons. They contain zinc. I mean, it's unbelievable. They're great. I think omega 3s. So pumpkin seeds are just a great thing to have on hand and to snack on
Hmm.
because of how rich they are in vitamins and minerals. So there's magnesium in dark chocolate, in avocados, nuts, beans, legumes, tofu,
Mm.
seafood, dark leafy greens, right? So you have some options there.
Some great
You can,
options.
yes, actually, some really great options. Also, Epsom salt baths is a
Hmm.
great way to get some magnesium. It's magnesium absorbed through the skin,
Hmm.
so it's an excellent way. A few times a week, a few times a week. You don't have to do it every day.
Hmm.
Um, but it's just not necessary. So, but yeah, you can take a bath,
And a
a few
bath
times a week.
also helps to calm you down and put you in a mood
Absolutely.
for a good sleep. So let's not forget about
Absolutely.
that either. Can
Mm-hmm.
can you talk about caffeine? And I'm asking that because I'm a coffee lover. I drink coffee
Mm-hmm.
every single day with sugar, and I also love wine. So let's just
Mm-hmm.
talk about sugar, caffeine, and wine.
Let's do it.
Let's
Where
do
would you
that.
like to start?
Start with the sugar.
Okay. That's a hard one. Um, as much as I love sugar, and I love sugar,
Oh
I
yeah.
have to shake my head at it.
Mm-hmm.
Sugar is what's known as an anti-nutrient, which means, not only is it void of any nutritional value, but it also depletes you of certain nutrients, including magnesium, which we
Mm.
just learned is really important
Yeah.
for our sleep, right? Um, my advice would be to just try to avoid sugar. I don't think we need to dig too deep into that. Like, just try to avoid sugar as much as you can, particularly the processed sugar,
Okay.
um, especially too close to bedtime,
Okay.
right? So you really don't want to do it too close to bedtime. Um, what do you want to talk about? Caffeine? Next.
Yes. Yes. I do. I do. I don't, but I do.
Coffee. Yeah, it's not terrible for you,
Okay.
especially if the coffee you drink is organic and you don't load it with sugar and cream. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah. Well. Wah, wah, wah.
But just coffee, straight up, even with the sugar and the cream, right? Like we want to be really careful about when we're consuming it, right?
Okay.
Because it's really about the timing. It's so all caffeinated drinks, we should really be very thoughtful about when we are consuming them, right? Because they
Okay.
cause us to stay awake. When we need a pick me up, we reach for caffeine, right? And so if you're having sleep issues, it's probably best to stop drinking anything with caffeine in it by, I would say, noon,
Okay.
because it can be very disruptive to your sleep. It could take you
Yeah.
longer to fall asleep. It could, cause some disruptions once you are asleep, that kind of thing. So try to stop your caffeine intake by noon.
Okay. So I usually have a cup in the morning when I get up, and then maybe a cup and a half, and then I'll have another one around 2. So I need to cut that one out.
I would suggest either cutting it out or just drinking it before noon.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about alcohol?
Another major sleep disruptor.
Ugh.
This is really a tough one because so many people, I hear all the time, they swear by their glass or two of wine or a cocktail before bed because it helps them to wind down. It helps them I hear a lot of people say it helps me to fall asleep, which is actually true of alcohol. It does help you to fall asleep. The problem is that it can be very disruptive to your sleep cycle, particularly your REM sleep, which happens towards the end of that 90-minute sleep cycle, right? And this is the part of the cycle where we dream, right? It's that state where we're almost awake, but this part of our sleep is believed to be very, very restorative. That there's a lot of, because I believe that, with dreams, when we dream, that we're working out a lot of our emotions, right? So I feel like, this stage is crucial to our mental health, right? And very necessary. It can kind of help us work through some of those emotional difficulties that we're having.
Yeah.
So we don't want problems with our REM sleep,
Okay.
because that essentially can cause you problems during your day.
Okay.
And alcohol can be disruptive in that way.
Okay. So you're not saying it's terrible to drink it at all, but try to do it before, like way before you get ready to go to bed.
Yeah, try to limit it. Maybe a drink or two. Try to do it at least 3 hours before bed. Drink a lot of water. Have your alcohol with a meal, that
Okay.
kind of thing.
Okay. And okay, so you have a couple more.
Yeah. Exercise. We could
Okay.
talk about that really quickly. I know this is a big one for you.
Yes.
But it's really great for resetting and regulating our circadian rhythm, right? Exercise produces cortisol, which means that it's really important to helping us stay awake, right?
Right.
Right? So it's really important to us throughout the day, but again, can be really important to us at night as well. I think that exercise ideally should be done early in the day,
Okay.
maybe first thing in the morning and outdoors, right? If you're able to do it outdoors, you're kind of, killing two birds with one stone, right?
Yep.
It's great, especially if you're having difficulty falling asleep. Right.
Okay.
Again, I know that there are people who exercise in the evening. They're like, oh, I go to 24-hour fitness at, midnight, this and that, and I'm fine. Okay, that's fine. You can be fine. Right. But if you're having trouble sleeping,
Right.
this is one thing that I suggest doing. Just try it out. See if it helps.
Okay.
Move your exercise routine to the morning.
Okay. I like working out in the morning. It also helps. It also helps with my productivity at work and my mood when I'm
Absolutely.
meeting with my CEO on Monday mornings. It's like, oh, I already worked out. I'm great, especially if I get up and go for a hike. Oh my goodness! So
Yep.
you get the sunrise.
Yep.
And you get the, just the natural air and all the mountains and everything. It's just great. I know everybody doesn't have that luxury though, but just getting outside, period. Is great.
You could walk around the block, if it's safe.
Yeah.
You can walk anywhere. So
what about like TV, social media? Should we cut that out too earlier?
Yes,
okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that, And you and I have talked about this a lot
Yeah.
too, right? And just how watching TV, I think binge viewing has been connected to poor quality sleep and insomnia. And they think that it might be because of the overstimulation, right?
Mm.
Too close to bedtime. And so this can really apply to something that's exciting as well as something that's disturbing, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it could move you in a certain direction, good or bad, right? That keeps you awake, right?
Mm.
Um, so also the watching television while you're in bed,
Yep.
um, particularly on a computer or tablet, or possibly even your phone, that's
Hmm.
also been connected to insomnia. Um, Interestingly, the same study that found it to be a problem, like watching TV on your computer or tablet, found no link between watching TV and insomnia symptoms.
Really?
Yes, yes. So watching TV before bed, insomnia symptoms, and they think that it might have something to do with the proximity of the light, right? So it's
Okay.
a
So
little bit
close to your
farther away.
face. Mm.
It's not all up in your face. I would still caution against that kind of exposure, even at a
Okay.
distance. I think that light, again, if it's an hour or two before bed, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Like, okay, maybe a show before you kind of cut the TV off and just rest and relax. That probably could be fine. But
Okay.
again, a lot of this is about listening to your body. What's working
Mhm.
for you, what isn't. I personally do not have a TV in my bedroom.
Yeah.
It's with good reason, because I found it to be disruptive. So I'd like to spend a little time talking about breathing.
Okay.
I think that this is a really, really important one. And I feel like if this is something, that people can implement, it can be life changing, right? Like if you
Wow.
pick one thing to do out of everything that we talked about, if you could only pick one, I would say pick the breathing, right?
Wow. Really?
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because they say that one can live 3 weeks without food, 3 days without water, and 3 minutes.
Mm.
Breathing is crucial for life.
Right.
I believe that regulated breathing is crucial for a healthy life.
Mm.
Um, Thankfully, breathing is one of the autonomic responses that we can actually control, and I think it's really important that we do. Um,
So, are
Historically,
you talking about like breath work? Like literally like
I'm
doing that
not.
as a practice, or are you just talking about
I'm just talking
regulating your
about
own
breathing.
breathing? Okay.
Yes, I'm just talking about just paying attention to your breaths, right? So historically speaking, the number of breaths that we take per minute has changed drastically. So there are some reports that indicate that the number has more than quadrupled over the last 100 years. Just sitting there taking breaths, right? We
Wow.
are breathing really, really rapidly. And, shallow rapid breathing reduces oxygenation to the blood and can
Mm-hmm.
cause tiredness and fatigue. It can cause breathing difficulties. It can cause weakness, panic attacks, right? And insomnia. Um, so if you think about it, rapid breathing is a signal to your brain that you're in danger.
Yeah.
And if it's done regularly, it can cause all kinds of problems in our bodies, right? So slower breathing is more of a signal to your brain that you're safe.
Hmm.
That you're okay, right? That you can rest, that you can relax. And so spending as much time in this safety zone, like this is a place where our bodies are able to take care of us. So it becomes really important that we stay here as much as possible throughout the day, right?
Wow. I mean, that
Um,
just goes to show how important something similar. I know everybody doesn't love yoga, but something similar to yoga, it's
mhm,
it's supposed to be a safe practice where you're loving yourself and you're taking care of
mhm,
yourself and you're being kind, and there's this calming music and this calming guided meditation if you do that sort of yoga. So
mhm,
this goes to show, and you're doing breath work in there as well often.
mhm,
Just goes to show
mhm,
how important it is to meditate and to
mhm,
focus on your breathing and to exercise.
mhm. Well, and they say that like the most important components of things like yoga, tai chi is the breathing. right? So it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really matter how you do it.
Right.
It doesn't really matter. I think that, one of the things that you can aim for, just several times throughout your day is slowing your breath down so that you're taking about 5 breaths. So you have about 5 breath cycles per minute,
Okay.
right? Um,
And the cycle,
Essentially,
you mean in and out? Okay.
yeah. So I would say you want your exhales to be longer than your inhales.
Okay.
So maybe doing 4 seconds in, right? 6 seconds out. Allowing for kind of like that, there's sort of that natural pause that happens at the bottom and the top of our breath cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that creates about a like 10 to 12 second breath cycle,
Okay.
which would mean, if we do the math, about
60
five
seconds. Yeah.
five cycles per minute,
Yeah.
right? That's ideal. If you take take your phone out and put on, set your timer to 1 minute, right? And just try to do those cycles and see if you can, do 5 cycles in that 1 minute. Part of the process too is really focusing on your breath. So that's why I say take out your phone, look at your timer, right? Like take some time to take those breaths, sort of let everything else go and just kind of pay attention to your breathing,
Yeah.
right?
I
And
mean,
I
and
think you
it's
can,
sorry.
it's okay.
It's such a form of self-love.
Yes.
It's such a part of self-love. It's such a part of I deserve to take this time for myself. And I think if you can
Yes.
look at it like that, hopefully, people will be more excited about doing it because it's
Mm-hmm.
a part of self-love.
Yeah, and it's free and it doesn't have to be weird. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like it can be if you want it to be, because I know that
Right.
there's a lot of methods out there that are a little strange that I have a hard time, kind of grabbing a hold of. It doesn't have to be that way, right? It
Okay.
can just be you and your breath. You could do it all through your nose, in through your nose, out through your nose, right? Again, there are different methods, right? And people will suggest things all day long. It doesn't have to be that complicated.
Okay.
Just breathe.
Yeah.
Just breathe,
Yeah.
and do it multiple times throughout the day. It
Hmm.
can be life changing.
Yeah.
Slow breaths, not too deep, because again, the more we inhale, the more it accesses that sympathetic nervous system, right? So not too deep, longer exhales than inhales. You should be good.
Okay.
Even trying that before you go to sleep, right? Just spending a little bit of time focusing on your breathing.
Speaking of sleep, is
Mm-hmm.
there like a bedtime routine that you have or that you suggest people should, kind of adopt a bedtime routine? Is that helpful?
I think that bedtime routines can be super beneficial to your
Okay.
sleep. Um, I mean, not only do some activities help boost the production of melatonin, right? Again, back to that, it's really important. Decrease the production of cortisol, but really doing the same thing every night in the same order can help your brain see those activities as really a precursor to sleep.
Mm.
Um,
Hey, sis. Hey, I just wanted to take a moment to ask you, have you subscribed to The Bright Side of 50 with Carla Palmer? If you have not, could you please take a moment, if you like the podcast, take a moment now to hit the subscribe button so that you become a subscriber. Turn on your notifications so that you're notified when a new episode drops, okay? Also, follow me on Instagram. I am The Bright Side of 50 over there on Instagram too. Thank you so much. Now I'll let you get back to the episode.
this is a part of the reason why I advocate for people to use their beds for sleep and sex only,
Okay.
right? It just causes less confusion. Your brain knows that when you climb into bed, one of two things is going to happen, right? So
Okay.
your routine, your bedtime routine really should take place outside of your bed, and it's your prep for getting into bed and going to sleep.
Okay.
It can be simple, right? And really what you want to do is just incorporate activities that promote rest and relaxation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Self-care activities are great. So it's really up to you what you want to do, right? And a lot of us already have nightly routines,
Uh-huh. I do.
right?
Yeah.
you know um so it's not that you necessarily need to implement anything, but maybe that you need to remove a few things.
Right.
Right. Because maybe your bedtime routine as it stands is good enough. It's fine. What do you do? Can I ask?
Yeah, so of course I do the regular things like you take a shower, wash my face, brush my teeth, floss, do my hair, what little I have, left. I struggle with alopecia, but I still try to take care of what's left on a nightly basis. And then I put on soft music or I'll listen to a podcast before I go to bed. But then there's that social media that creeps in where I'm like, oh, I recorded some things. I can make a reel. It's like reels take a minute. You really want to start making a reel right now, and then you get caught up in that and you look up and it's 12:30 or it's 1 o'clock, and my bedtime, I set my timer for 10:30 p.m. That gives me 30 minutes, to wind down and do all the things that I need to do and try to get into bed by 11:15. But that social media always creeps in on me.
It's just become a part of your routine, right? You're doing so much that is right, and that's working for you with regards to your sleep, right? It's just about establishing new habits,
Yeah.
And it's I make it sound like it's simple. It's not. I know it's not, but it's also not something that you want to condemn yourself about, right? And I think that it's one of those things where if you just kind of just sort of let it be, sometimes it just goes away.
Yeah.
If you don't spend a whole bunch of time focusing on it, right? Because again, like it sounds like you're doing so much that is right. Yeah.
Okay. Yay.
Yeah. So um don't go in on yourself because of the one thing that you think you're doing wrong, right? You just sort of have established it as something that's regular and normal for you to do. You just kind of have to undo that,
Awesome. Well, it's good to know that I'm doing some things right. So I got to focus on that social media, and then I should be good to go. What What are some other things that people might incorporate?
So again, anything that's relaxing, anything that kind of tends to you, right? Journaling is great. The breathing, deep, slow breathing is great.
Okay.
Meditating, some light stretching. You don't want to
Okay.
do too much, so you don't want to do like a whole yoga class before you go to bed, right? But just some light stretching. Yeah, simple
Okay.
things like that. It doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be complex. And actually journaling can be really, really great if you are struggling with anxiety. Just sort of doing like a kind of like a brain dump, right? What's worrying you? What's on your mind? What happened today, right? And just kind of
Yeah.
letting all of that stuff go, putting pen to paper and just letting some of that stuff go before you sleep so that you don't carry it with you,
Anything else?
into your sleep.
Yeah, that's one thing that I do also after work or before I close down from work. I dump
Mm,
everything out of my brain onto either my pad or the computer, or
that's good.
I'll send an email to myself that says things to do. Like if I don't want to go and try to find somewhere to put it, I'll just be like things to do, and I'll just type all these things and then I'll send it to myself, and that'll be an email that I open the next day. But I don't want to leave work with that on my mind. And
Mm-hmm.
I just try to leave it there because that can be anxiety provoking, and I don't need that. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. These are all so great. It's so great to talk about these things with you, and I hope that people are able to take away some nuggets, some gems that they can incorporate into their way of living, and right, because this is a way of living. Like sleep hygiene is really
It is.
such a huge part Anything of the way else? that we do life, and we need to do this with quality. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of the things that you listed and that you talked about in this episode are going to be really good for people, who listen to the podcast. And hey, guys, share the podcast out. I think especially this episode is just really great for people who didn't really know what sleep hygiene even meant, right? Like I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
it's a new term, but it's a term that's newer for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Well, thank you for being here today. It's been really great having you. And I look forward to people looking you up and checking out the journal journey by My Beautiful Intentions. Anna, anything else?
For now, I wish everybody the best. Hope that everybody can get their sleep hygiene right,
Yeah, yeah,
and really get some good sleep. It's so important. So
yeah. I wish the same too for everybody who's listening to this podcast. Make sure you prioritize your sleep. And also make sure you follow The Bright Side of 50 here on Spotify or YouTube or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to follow me on social media, I can be found at The Bright Side of 50 on Instagram. And I can also be found at GYSB Movement on Instagram. That's my health and fitness side. All right, I look forward to seeing everybody really soon. Take care. Bye bye.